Jesus was crucified on a Friday. A person named Joseph of Arimathea asked for his body when they took it down. Joseph was wealthy. He could afford a private tomb hewn out of the rock, the Bible tells us, with a large stone sealing the door. There are surviving tombs like this in Israel, Palestine. And they had a large stone, about 5 or 6 feet, a round stone, but it would be about 6 feet tall and very thick and very heavy. And they'd roll this in front of the door of the tomb to prevent people from going in and looting it if the person buried there was rich or had something valuable. The Gospel of Mark tells us that Mary of Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome went early in the morning to anoint the body of Jesus. And they were asking one another, who's going to roll away the stone? Because the three of them probably had not the strength to do it. But the stone had been rolled away. And they stepped in to the tomb and found a young man sitting on the right side, dressed in a white robe. He said to them, "Do not be amazed. You seek Jesus of Nazareth, who was crucified. He has risen. He is not here. Go and tell his disciples and Peter that he is going before you to Galilee. There you will see him as he told you." And they went and fled from the tomb, trembling and with astonishment, and said nothing to anyone, for they were afraid. One of the things that troubles scholars, which is sort of off the issue a little bit, is that's where the Gospel of Mark originally ended, and then someone added a great deal to it. But saying nothing to anyone, for they were afraid. When I was in theological school all those years ago, we had a student whose idea has stayed with me, stays with me. I want to follow the religion of Jesus, he said, not the religion about Jesus. What do we call the religion of Jesus? There's not a simple answer. I can't give you one. The great deal of the religion of Jesus revolved around love. Not, movie love or television love. But in the words of Jesus, love thy neighbor as thyself. Love yourself and then love your neighbor. And this is a universal idea of religion. There's a man named Hazrat Inayat Khan, who lived from 1852 to 1927, was a Hindu musician, professor of music, and a Sufi, which is a mystical branch of Hinduism, or a mystical branch of Islam, Sufism. And he decided to set up Sufi centers in the West. He thought, this is good enough for India, but the Europeans need help, so he went to Europe and England and opened the center in London, 1914, and other places in Europe and America. And his definition of religion: love is the essence of all religion, all mysticism and philosophy. And for the one who has learned this, love fulfills the purpose of religion, ethics, and philosophy. And the lover is raised above all diversities of faith and belief. Cliff Reed, a British Unitarian minister, tells us there are two kinds of religion. Religion with love at its heart is true. All other religion is false, whatever its claims and dogmas. With love at its heart is true, the rest is false. You know, there's all kinds of religious houses in the area. But if they're talking about love of their neighbor, love of their community, love of the world, love of life, then they are a true religion, according to this. We're supposed to love our neighbor. Who's our neighbor? Well, Jesus tells the story of the Good Samaritan. I won't repeat the whole story. I'm sure you've heard it. But he told the story when someone asked him, who is my neighbor? Now, the branch of Judaism that Jesus belonged to was based in Jerusalem. And there was another branch of Judaism called the Samaritans, who were based in northern Israel in an area called Samaria. There are still Samaritans. They were a large group in biblical times, but there's only 1,000 or fewer left. But they claim to be the original true Judaism. And they still claim that. They are the true Jewish faith. Now, if you recall your history of the Protestant Reformation in the 1500s, between the Catholics and the Protestants, this is sort of the way the Jerusalem Jews and the Samaritan Jews related to each other. During the Reformation, people proved their point by burning each other, literally burning each other at the stake. You know, you have a religious, I mean, our Unitarian people in Transylvania, long story, but there was a debate and between the head of the Unitarians in Transylvania and a point went from the Catholic Church, and the Catholic Church said to the Unitarian, if I win this debate, we will burn you at the stake. And the Unitarian said, if you win this debate, you can go home free. If I win this debate, you can go home free. That's the difference. Burning was to prove that the love, Christian love, their version was true. Jesus was saying that it isn't just people you like and get along with, but you must love everybody, even if you don't like them. Gospel of John tells the story of the woman taken in adultery. A capital offense in those days, but apparently not a capital offense for the man. Just the woman was to be punished. Anyhow, she was brought before Jesus by a crowd of men. And they said, The law of Moses says to stone her. What do you say? And they kept asking him, well, tell us what to do. What do you say? The law says to stone her, which is a way of killing her, beating her to death by throwing rocks at her. And Jesus finally said, all right, but let the one among you who has never sinned cast the first stone. Let the one among you who has never sinned cast the first stone. Silence. And after a while, Jesus said, where are they? Where's the crowd? And the woman said, they've left. And Jesus said, didn't even one of them condemn you? And the woman said, no. And Jesus said, neither do I. Go and sin no more. This is an act of love, an act of caring, an act of forgiveness, an act of compassion. St. Paul in Philippians tells us we are told, instead of each one of us watching out for our own good, watch out for what is better for others. And in the Old Testament book of Micah, we find, he has told thee, O mortal, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you but to do justice, to love kindness, to walk humbly? The story of the crucifixion tells us that there were two criminals who were crucified along with Jesus, one on each side. And one of the criminals said, Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. And Jesus answered, I tell you, this very day you will be with me in paradise. He didn't say, what did you do? Why are you here? He said, it's forgiveness again. Act of forgiveness and love. Well, we can argue the theology of all this, but the important point is the forgiveness and the love. We have stones in our own lives to roll away. We are often trapped in our own tombs and wanting to get out. And what tombs? Well, addiction is a tomb. My grandfather, Widrick, a nice man, farmer, raised a family, was an alcoholic. He made his own wine. He bought grapes every fall and crushed them and made his own wine. And he had 3 of these great big barrels, tons, or what do they call them, kegs, holding about 50, 60 gallons of wine each. Had 3 of those in the cellar. And he made wine to fill up. And trying to be a good Mennonite, he would go to church every Sunday. They had you could go forth and pray for healing. They had a healing ceremony. He'd go forth and he'd kneel in front of the pulpit, and the ministers would pray over him, and the congregation would pray for him. He'd pray. And church service was over. They'd get in their horse and buggy and have a car, and he'd go home. And the family story is that when he got home, he would go down cellar and start drinking wine until he was plastered. He died. My grandmother went down cellar and opened all the bungs, and cellar, farm cellar had a dirt floor. She let all 150 or so gallons of wine run out on the floor. Uh, People get addicted to a lot of things. I used to smoke. At one point, I was smoking 3 packs of cigarettes a day. I was a veritable chimney. Uh, I gave it up because Trudy, my wife, had sinus infections. And she'd go to the doctor, and the doctor would treat her. And finally, the doctor said, "Look, you're a smoker. You're wasting my time and your money treating these sinus infections, because when you smoke, your sinus gets irritated and it gets infected. If you don't want sinus infections, don't smoke." So she called me. I was at work, and she said, "I'm going to give up smoking." I said, "Well, I'll give up smoking if you have to give up smoking." So, you know, there we were. It's called love, I guess. Right now, one of the things that is troubling us, I think, in this country is authoritarianism. Part of it comes under the title of Christian nationalism. Christian nationalism is a movement, an idea that takes the religious teachings, the Christian teachings, the biblical teachings, and try to turn them into um, very strict rules that gives the person making the rules a sense of being the elect, the chosen ones, the only people like them. I mean, the only people I like are people like me. The only people that should be free are people like me. The only people who running society and making decisions for society should be me. Um, Anybody that doesn't fit my definition should be banned, should be pushed aside. Um, they ban books, they ban ideas, they ban reading material. Um, they don't want children exposed to ideas. They don't want different religious groups to be free to worship. They attack synagogues, they attack mosques. Um, we're in a funny position. We might ban the shooting of school children, but we don't. It's too difficult. But we can take away your right to read, you take away your right to worship. We can take away all these other things. But, you know, Christian nationalism is a form of authoritarianism. We are struggling with authoritarianism. Authoritarianism is ruled by a small group or a single person. A person not above the law, but who is the law. I mean, World War II was fought. Most of us aren't old enough anymore to remember World War II. But it was Nazism and fascism that were the enemies. Um, Germany and Italy attempting to conquer other countries and rule them the way they were ruling their own countries. The Cold War with the Soviet Union after World War II was the same thing. We had a dictatorship in Russia. They used communism, which is an interesting theory about sharing wealth, as an excuse to be authoritarian and have one man rule. We are still struggling with authoritarianism. Does one man have the right to rule the country and tell us what's true and what's false. Jesus said, I came, Gospel of John, I came that they may have life and have it abundantly. What is abundance? I looked it up. Abundance is defined as profusion, more than enough, prosperity, quantity, many similar words. Abundant life is. There was a early Christian scholar named Origen, lived from 185 to 253. He was martyred for being a Christian, tortured, freed, died of his injuries. Origen said we have free faith, free will. We have choice. We are creatures with free will. Free will created out of overflowing love as rational and spiritual beings. Abundant life is rolling away those stones that keep us in, practicing our free will. Free will doesn't include harming other people because that's depriving them. Free will is being who we want to be, loving who we want to love, living our love the way we want to live. There are limits. The Hippocratic oath taken by physicians is often alleged to claim to start with the phrase, first do no harm. But it doesn't. It actually contains the words, I will abstain from all intentional wrongdoing and harm. We're not going to hurt anybody. We're not going to hurt other people. And off both we all could take. What's an abundant life? When I was in college, we had a student classmate. He was there for 2 years, disappeared at the end of his second year. Why was he there? His parents insisted that he go to college. What did he want to do? He wanted to be a clown. You don't learn to be a clown in a state college. He wanted to go to, so there was a clown school somewhere that he wanted to go to. And sometime during his second year of college, he managed to get himself accepted in clown school. And he went, I don't know how he made out as a clown, but it's what he wanted to do. I want to be a clown. I don't want to be whatever you think I'm going to be after college. Oh, that was his abundant life. My abundant life came from my wife, Trudy. You'd have liked Trudy. I was working in a college library, had gotten interested in Universalist Church. We met there. How did you meet? Someone asked her. I found him under the pew, she said. I won't bore you with the details, but she changed my life. She got me to give up library work and become a minister. I don't want to do that. But every time we came to a decision place, had to make up a major decision in our lives, she would say to me, don't be an old stick in the mud. I'm like, okay. And we were off, seminary ministry, Cape Town, children, an abundant life, a great deal of life. I mean, how can I judge? How can any of us judge what's an abundant life for someone else? We have a family friend known since their birth who's changed gender, decided they didn't want to be what they were, they wanted to be the other gender. And they're happy. They found their abundance. Abundant life is the answer to the question of Mary Oliver, the poet. Mary Oliver said, "Tell me what it is you plan to do with your one wild and precious life. What is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? Not what does he plan you to do, not do they tell you to do, but what do you want to do?" Abundant life is a life overflowing with love, a life of quality. Easter comes down through the ages as the hope of an abundant life for all of us. A life of compassion for our neighbors, compassion for our world, and compassion for ourselves. And benediction, what more have we to give to one another? What more have we to give to one another than love and understanding? Amen. Go in peace.